Hey guys, welcome to the newest build on the channel, the Khajiit Slave. And honestly, this was going to be the first ever build I was going to make, but I thought of the Dragon Priest. I'm like, well, that's going to be so much cooler. Then this was going to be the second one. I was already working on the second one, and I guess I forgot about it after that. And then the day I released the Hold Guard, I'm like, oh yeah, the Khajiit Slave. So then that's what this build is. So, if you guys actually have any recommendations for builds, please tell me in the comments. I would love to do builds. Like, honestly, I think the first build I get, I will do it as long as it's like appropriate. So I will do it. So now I'm gonna be doing the backstory first instead of the race and all that, just so people don't really get confused, because I don't know, I just get confused sometimes, and I don't want other people to. So, now for the backstory, the Khajiit Slave was actually born in elsewhere, because, you know, he's a Khajiit, that's where they're from. And his parents loved to waste money, even though they were rich people. The mother always had to go buy the newest piece of jewelry or the newest clothing item that came out into the stores, while the father loved to gamble, and he failed every time in gambling. He was horrible at it, but he loved to do it. So one day they were horrible on money. They needed it desperately, and they promised themselves that they would stop doing what they're doing, and just so they can at least have enough money for the child. And eventually one day they saw a couple dark elves coming into elsewhere, and they immediately knew what they were doing, because you could tell by the clothing that they were slave owners. And so they just kept taking like little like nasty looks at them, and the dark elves noticed it eventually, and they noticed the two parents with the little baby with them, and they walked up to the parents asking, how much do you want for that child? They originally were kind of thinking about, they were like, we don't really want to sell it, and then he offered them about 50,000 gold for the child, and the parents were like, yes. So they immediately gave away their child for that money, and the next day after they gave him away, the father went back to gambling, and the mother went back to go buy clothes. So they're just money wasters. But a couple years after the Khajiit Slave was now property, he just eventually hated all of the dark elves. He just didn't like them. He just despised them. And this slave operation was like a black market like thing. There were secret slave operations that were going on in Morrowind, all across Tamriel. There were like little areas where people would have secret operations, and Morrowind was the head capital of it, because it still had slavery like things. So eventually one day the Khajiit Slave had an idea to start a rebellion to go against his masters. But eventually his owner eventually just started getting the idea, thinking that slavery wasn't right. Over the countless years he's been doing it, he eventually realized it is not right to do this, and he's gonna stop. But when he found out that one of his slaves is gonna start a rebellion, he didn't tell anyone else. He said, I know what you're doing, I'm gonna keep it a secret, and I will help you. So one night the Khajiit Slave was just sitting there in his cage, and he was watching the guards just coming around to every cage, checking if everyone's in there. And when the guard came to the Khajiit Slave's cage, the Khajiit Slave took his arm, put it through the cage, grabbed the guy by the head, and snapped his neck off the cage itself, killing him. And so he took the key and unlocked all the doors. He unlocked his door and all the cage doors to everyone else, just so he can get the rebellion started. Eventually they tried to find a couple weapons and gave a giant sneak attack on the guards there. And eventually it was like a half-hour battle, because there was 50 slaves that rebelled, and there was about 40 of the guards, or 40 of the slave people. So yes, they had the slaves did have an advantage over people, but they didn't know fighting because a majority of them were born into slavery, while some of them were just kidnapped and they may not have ever learned how to fight. The only fighting a lot of they had was just using the hoe to like dig up dirt and stuff like that. They don't really know how to use a weapon. But eventually, the Khajiit slave's owner came in and started helping out, and he was a pretty good fighter. Like, he knew what he was doing because he fought in the Great War, so he knew stuff that was happening. But so eventually, the Khajiit slave's owner was killed, and just so all the other remaining Khajiit can go away. And like, well, because there was a total of 10 slaves that actually survived out of the 50. There were a couple Khajiits and a couple Argonians that actually survived. So eventually they fled Morrowind and they went to Cyrodiil. And they wanted to just at least group up there, and they wanted to head to Skyrim because they thought that it was going to be a safe area, not hearing about the rebellion that was going on there. So eventually they all went across the border, and they heard some ruffling in the bushes, so the Khajiit slave went in and checked it out until he got knocked out with a shield in the back of his head, and he went face first into the ground. And the other slaves started attacking the Imperials that were there, and they all were killed, but the Khajiit slave. So he was taken to Helgen and was now going to be executed for him being thought to be just a couple bandits. So he was praying to the gods to at least give him a second chance, because all he did was be a slave his entire life, and then when he freed remaining people, he thought he was doing good. So after he saw a dragon come and burn Helgen down, he thought that that was his second chance. So then he took it and he started to go help people. So, yeah, so now the factions you would do would be the Companions, the main storyline, the Dragonborn DLC, so you can get all the equipment and weapons, and the Dawn Guard. So now you can, there is the Thieves Guild, which I would recommend because this character is like a sneaky like character, because he had to sneak around to actually get the rebellion started. So yeah, now you don't have to make him sneaky, you can make him just pure tank. So it's all up to you. Now the race is obviously Khajiit, don't even know why I said that. Standing Stone, you can choose the Lord Stone or the Atronach. It won't really matter, but I chose the Atronach just so I can at least absorb some of the incoming magic, because magic is a real danger. I just noticed, like, during the making of the Hold Guard, like trying to get all the scenes and that together, I noticed that magic, I see a lot more of it, and it's horrifying. So yeah, now gear, obviously the Nordic chestplate, boots, gauntlets, and now for the weapons, you can have 2 axes. I just chose the axes because they look really cool, so it's all up to you. For the bow, I just went with a regular Nord bow, and with the arrows, I'm not sure if they're modded arrows, I can't really tell, but it's called the Nord Hero arrow, which I'm pretty sure it's not a mod, though I could be wrong. I may gotten it confused with another arrow type, but who knows. Now companions, that is all up to you. I didn't use a companion because a lot of my mods won't have companions, because I just don't really see much of a need for them. So yeah. Now perks, obviously there's one-handed, archery, heavy armor, sneak, and lockpick. Now you can also add pickpocketing, but that is all up to you. So yeah, that is going to be the end of this build, and the next build I'm going to be working on is the Paladin, and I'm kind of psyched for that. So remember, if you guys have any ideas for another build, please say it in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.